Imagine a world as a leader. You could just delegate. And imagine as a report that you have autonomy to make your own decisions, do your own thinking, and showing them how smart you are.
Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk.
And I'm Jonathan Aronson.
And today we're going to talk about the differences between coaching and directing someone. This is a really great topic. So we'll start off with Jonathan. What do you expect listeners to get out of today's episode?
Well, what I'd like two things. One is from a leader point of view, hopefully they're going to get out of this when to direct, when to coach, and something about what's the difference, and how do you recognize which one to use? And then I'd also like to have the people that report to leaders who are listening to the podcast today. I'd like to get them to the point where they have a better understanding of knowing what to ask for that they need, whether it's direction or whether it's coaching or a combination of the both. So this will be partly for the leader and then partly for the report.
This is great. Yeah. I would hope to get out. Sometimes I struggle with not necessarily directing and kind of coaching, but that I feel like it's an in between where you're trying to like motivate someone. And like listeners probably know that sometimes I can go on and on a little bit. And so where I like to kind of cover, give them a couple stories about where I overcame a certain challenge and stuff. And so sometimes I feel like I'm overly directing. So it'd be really great if we can kind of cover that. I would love to get some insight into like when is too much of that, because sometimes sharing experience I feel is important. So I'll let you kick this off.
Okay.
And we'll see where we go.
Yeah. So, the first thing I'd like to say is most leaders are way more comfortable directing. It's easier for them, they feel. It's faster for them, they feel, to do it. So, and reports like that too. Just tell me what to do. All right. Don't ask me a bunch of questions. Tell me what to do. Right. So, why is that? Let's first understand why that occurs. Well, when you're coaching somebody, you're not just coaching the problem, you're coaching the person. And so it does take more time. And, leaders are always worried about how much time they have. So the idea of coaching is really investing the time up front will save you time on the back end. But initially, they just want to direct. It's easier. It's more comfortable. It's not as challenging, really, than, like coaching is. So they get stuck in the directing mode, and then the reports, them too, they don't want to think a lot about it. They just want to make sure they're doing what's right, what's expected of them. So just tell me what to do. Because if I'm not telling you what to do and I'm as a leader and you have to kind of help you, figure it out yourself, but I'm going to hold you accountable to meeting the expectation, that doesn't feel nearly as comfortable as you just telling me what to do and I can get on with it. So that's what you're working against,
Do you think that ends up creating a situation where a leader then becomes more overwhelmed because then people expect we'll go to them for more decisions then as a result?
Well, exactly. I always say leaders work too hard. Okay, and they work too hard because they always think they need to have the answer. The other problem with the leaders, honestly, insecurity. I want to have control over everything. Okay, that's not leadership. Okay, that's dictatorship. That's not leadership. That's what in the industry we call command and control. Jump. I'll tell you how high to jump and just go do it. That's not leadership. Leadership is helping people develop and them taking your lead for them to grow and be more than they otherwise would be.
Yeah, like trying to teach people how to make their own decisions and hold themselves accountable for, as opposed to just saying, well, I did what you told me to do, it didn't work out great, right? Like that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So, all right. So, how do you think like leaders that are listening here can kind of determine whether they're too far on one end of the spectrum? Because I actually struggle with this sometimes myself.
Yeah, I mean, and we should have a follow up on this around situation leadership, okay? Because part of it, and I can introduce the model of situation leadership, but just think of it this way: depending on where people are in their development stage, is whether you're going to lead them or whether you're going to direct them or whether you're going to coach them. Think of it as an axis. On one side, you have coaching support. On the left side, and then on the bottom, going across, you have directing. And you're somewhere in that, grid of where you land. But it's going to be based on tasks, okay? Not based on the whole thing. So in a certain task, you might need direction, right? On a certain task, that may then lead to direction and support. That might then lead to support, then that might then lead to that you can delegate. Okay, and that's kind of the idea of situation leadership.
I see.
Um, you know, um, so if you have an enthusiastic learner, let's just break it down here, right?
Okay.
You have a new team member who comes into your group,
Hmm.
and they're new. They've never been in your group before. They've had some experience, but they're fairly green, right? Highly enthusiastic, right? Very committed to doing the job. But what's their level of knowledge?
Yeah, they're probably going to be super new at it. They're going to need a lot of guidance and direction.
Right.
Okay.
There
Okay.
you go. Direction. You already said it. They
Yeah.
don't need coaching. They don't need support. They're enthusiastic, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they
Right?
want to do a great job. They want to dive in. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're overly
Right.
enthusiastic, but yeah, yeah, of course.
Right. Right. So then they've been doing the job for a while, right? It's a little harder than they thought. What happens to their commitment to doing, you know, the excitement and the commitment to doing the work?
Oh yeah.
That starts to wane, right?
Yep. Yeah, we had that at
And
Google
what's
where we would call that the imposter syndrome, where you're really enthusiastic, and then as you start coming in there, you realize like, oh my goodness, everyone's so much smarter than me. I'm not fit to be here. And then your output drops, your morale drops a little bit, and yeah, I think it's like I don't know, first 6 months or so, first 3 months depends. It varies for people, but yeah, that would align with what you're talking about.
But I also want you to think of it not just time, how long they've been there, how fast they're developing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's true.
What they bring into themselves, their own job knowledge and their own experiences, right? That's all going to affect it. So essentially, what's happening here is that they have some job knowledge at this point, but remember, it's task specific. So they have some knowledge of doing the task, right? Still not totally competent. Can't just let them go. So guess what? You as a leader, what do you still need? What do you still continue to give them?
Yeah, direction. Yeah.
Direction, right?
Yeah.
But now they're unsure. Okay, and this is where coaching comes in. Coaching is partly support. Okay, and this is the opportunity for the leader to go, hey, it's okay. You're right where you need to be. I don't expect you any further along in doing this task. I got you back. Let's talk about what you're going through and how I can help support you. So now you're in a coaching mode and a directing.
Okay. And do
Okay.
you want to be clear with them when you're switching gears into this? Like, do you think that you should go and explain the system for how it works, that so that way you can have like an open dialogue for how you're approaching like leading them?
Well, what do you think?
Well, I think that's important because when you know what to expect, then the person understands. I think I mentioned in a prior podcast where one of the things that when we've talked about situation leadership in the past, that I thought was very interesting is that you have two different people at different stages of their careers, and they meet up in the hallway, and they say, "Boy, Henry's always on my case, telling me what to do," and the other one says, "Oh, he leaves me alone." But it's because they're in two different stages of their careers, and you're getting that different guidance from that leader. So I think it's important, but do you kind of like spell it out for them ahead of time? Like do you actually say, okay, we're going to start coaching now? Is that cool with you? Like, do you just go into it like that?
Coaching is a focused conversation with a purpose, with an end in mind. Okay, so in coaching, you always want to establish a gap, and the gap is um, the space in between where you are now and a future outcome, right? So in this case, you're working with the employee. They're not feeling, very confident and this imposter syndrome, right? So what's the goal here? Well, the goal is to make them more confident and boost their morale, which, so that they are, feeling motivated to move forward in the process, right? So so you want it, so that's so the gap, you have a gap. And the gap is, ooh, the kind of imposter syndrome now and feel confident later. That's where you're after. So that's where the coaching occurs.
Okay. So if I were in this situation, the first thing I would be doing is probably, telling them a story about how I was the same way and overcame it, and like, don't worry, it'll be like, so that's not coaching, obviously. So how do you, from coaching and asking questions and getting them to kind of realize that they're fit to be there and fully capable, how do you get that to that point?
Yeah, so there's four skills you want to use when you're coaching. All right, and I call it, turn on the light, but in this case, light is spelled Lite. Okay, first one is active listening, listening to learn what's being said, what's not being said, right? Listening is also noticing body language. When I go into a with anybody, whether it's a one-on-one situation or a team, even I am so everything's data. I'm taking it in, right? So because I'm learning from that, right? So listening to learn. That's what you
Hmm.
want to do.
Okay.
Okay. And then the biggest arsenal really you have in your toolbox as a coach when you're coaching is asking very poignant, open ended, probing questions. And I get this a lot. That's a skill that leaders, when I start introducing coaching to them and how it works, is like, I really need to learn how to ask better open ended questions because, again, a lot of leaders ask close ended questions, So
What's
did
the
you get what you
difference?
need?
Well,
Did you
what's the
get what you,
difference? Oh,
it's a yes or no answer.
oh,
It's a close ended question. A An open ended question will elicit way more information, right? So that might be a what question. So what's resonating with you? What do you think about what I just said? What impact is it what I just mentioned have on you? How attentive goes to a direction? How do you think you should move forward? Um, it could be how do you think of, how do you feel you should take action at this point, or, um, but, just kind of think how questions are more action oriented. You want to stay away from why questions when they're directed at a person because that puts them on the defensive. You don't
oh,
want
I
to do
see.
that. Okay,
Okay.
why would you do that? Or
Yeah.
why did what? I mean, you could say what would be another. I guess this is like a white question. Like what would make you do that? Like So
Yeah.
remember, tone and inflection also have a portray. But why try to avoid directing them to people. You can ask a why question. Why do you think that happened? You could say that. Okay.
Okay.
Um, but you know, in coaching, the what question is your big tool. You know,
Okay.
what happened here? What do you think about that? There's books out there on asking questions in different situations, but so inquiring for insight, right? You're learning, you're asking those questions to learn, and then you're listening to learn. Okay, so
Okay.
those are two skills. And then the third one in coaching is telling your truth. Okay, what is telling your truth? That's the LITE. Remember I said? So telling your truth.
Mm.
Telling your truth is where you are giving feedback, making observations, telling them the impact from it, talking about the expectation that you've had. Um, and in that, you also want to check for understanding, right? So that's coaching. You're going back to inquiring for insight and listening to learn. So you see how they're all kind of tying it in, but telling your truth is you get to speak up and tell them what you think, or and why you think it. You should put that in back of it too, or what the expectation is, okay, and why do you have this expectation? Getting
Yeah.
clear on that is very helpful. So that's the third skill in coaching. And the fourth skill is expressing confidence in the people that you are coaching. I mean, what does that mean? That means catch them doing something right. That means, being authentic in your praise, but letting them know, hey, you got this. You're right where you need to be. If we got a problem, I'm here. We'll work it out. Just keep doing what you're doing. Look forward. Before you know it, this will be a task you won't even think about it.
Oh,
Okay.
that's great.
Those are the four coaching skills.
Okay. How do you blend the coaching with directing?
Well, again, depending on where they are in their development level of that task, okay, which if you go to a situation leadership model, that would be an S2 style, which is highly directive, highly supportive, or coaching behavior, right? So, um, you got to kind of feel out where are they at. These are like in one-on-ones. You have the opportunity. That's where this
Mm-hmm.
is mostly. Where as a new leader have those one-on-ones to do this. Now, as you get better at it, you're going to realize on what I call flyby coaching. Flyby coaching is, let's say you're working actually in the same place together. And somebody comes by your desk and says, "Hey, boss, uh, can you tell me if this is right?" Okay, I'm not. I'm not. And it was like, so you got to think: is he brand new? If he's brand new, I'm not sure what to do here. Then you probably got to direct, right? But if he's
Mm-hmm.
been there for a while, say, so well, what's going on? Just what inquire for insight, right? Because you're learning. You're learning what this person needs. And he goes, well, I'm not sure if this is right. And you go, I get it. Well, have you done this before? Yeah. What was the outcome? Well, it seemed to be good. I was like, well, why don't you walk me through the steps and, we can kind of discuss it together and see if you're on the right track. And so you're giving, and if they miss something, you can direct them. Especially if they're not like they haven't been doing it forever. But then you're also blending in the coaching, which is so what do you think about what I just said? How is this information helpful to you? There's a how question without direction, but
I
well,
see.
what about this information could be helpful for you?
So if a leader is new at trying out the more coaching versus directing, what would you suggest them do to get like practice? Like at the end of the one-on-one, do you say, "Hey, can I have some feedback on my coaching," or do you just ask like have a like we're talking now like a practice session with another coach?
Um, yeah, well, coaching's a learned skill, you know. So it's not like you're just gonna throw yourself at it. There are coaching books out there that you certainly can read about the method of coaching. The practice, Sure, asking for feedback from a report, but we all know that feedback for reports tend to be a little, depending on the relationship, of course, tend to be a little skittish about giving negative feedback
Hmm.
to their leader. So a peer, a boss, practice the coaching, see what it sounds like. It is a learned skill. Um, like I remember when I started, and everybody already does some sort of coaching. They just don't realize it. When I went to coaching school, they pointed that out. But now that I've been doing it for years, those questions fly off me. You really kind of get the person to think for themselves, to lead them to their own outcome. So that needs to be, and have that confidence to make those decisions. What do you think's in it for the leader when you coach them versus just directing?
Well, the leader's going to have much more time in their day to be able to do more things because you're elevating the people around you to be more independent. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
you're virtually building self reliance in the people that you're leading, right? To the point that you can just delegate.
Hmm.
Imagine a world as a leader, you can just delegate. And imagine as a report that you have autonomy to make your own decisions, do your own thinking, and showing them how smart you are. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
most people, evidence is proven. Workers who have autonomy are happier workers.
Yeah, it always reminds me of the like situation where the more I would delegate in my team, the more management would be like, "So what do you do, Henry? Like, what's your role? Like, what's your actual contributions?" And I would
Right.
explain to them that, well, the fact that I've developed other leaders and allowed people to kind of think on their own, like that's a good skill. But oftentimes companies don't always want that. They want like actual work product from their leaders, which I think the alignment's off. But I have a question. So let's say that this is great for somebody that's a current leader. But what if their manager, if there's someone is the report or the manager's manager is someone that is very directive and doesn't do any coaching? Do you have any tips for like trying to get them to maybe move more towards a coaching model or to help them out, or is that just kind of a lost cause?
None of it's a lost cause. I mean, that's where the leader, see, you know, managing and coaching are two different things, right? Managing a project is just that, make sure things are getting done on time. Excuse me, on time in the way that it's designed. That the task or the project is being done.
Okay.
Coaching really is about developing people. So first of all, if somebody's directing all the time, it's up to the leader. And if you understand from a report that you can ask for what you need, saying, I understand that, but I'm just not feeling too confident. Can you help me with that? Okay, now that some people are uncomfortable talking about themselves. I get it, especially engineers, right? So it says, well, I want to, I want to make, you just say something like, I want to make sure I'm not wasting time, and I'm not sure I'm doing this correctly. Can you tell me? Or you could say, I'm pretty sure I'm doing it right. I just want to make sure I am. And then you go, well, here's an opportunity for you to coach the person.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to direct. Yes, you're doing it right. Go. Right? That's
Mm-hmm.
easy. But then they're going to come back to you again and go, am I sure I'm doing it right? So I think the opportunity for the reports to picture and say, I'm pretty confident I'm doing it right, but I'm not feeling confident
Mm-hmm.
about it, because I don't want to put my foot in it or whatever. And then you go, well, what's making you, you know, it just, it's up to the leader then to consider, should I be coaching this person or leading them? That takes practice. And that leader needs their leader to help support them.
Yeah. Okay.
There,
So
there are models that people can follow. I'll touch upon in a second. You had a question?
Yeah, so basically, it sounds like it's very important for the leader to understand where that person's at and have that dialogue with the person that's on their team. So that way they can effectively ensure that they are. So, for example, if you don't have that discussion of where they're at and you're directing, and you either tell someone, go do this, and they are, it's something that's like super easy for them or something that they feel under challenged. But then on the flip side, if you give them something that is extremely difficult outside their warehouse, they may not feel comfortable speaking up, and then it could end poorly, or whatever happens, like they're trying to chase and figure it out and they don't do a great job. So it sounds like and correct me if I'm wrong, it's very important for that leader to dive in, to understand where they're at, to know how to balance it, to know how to effectively coach and challenge them, so that we, because your job as the leader is to make sure that they have all the tools that they need to succeed. But it sounds like if they just start coaching and or directing without thinking about where that person's at, it can go south as well.
Yep. Yeah. Again, the two skills that excuse me, the two skills that leaders need is know how to direct and when to direct,
Yeah.
and knowing how to coach. Coaching is, I got into coaching back in around 2004, 2005. Okay, it wasn't very well known, and now people seek it out. They want coaches. They realize the value. Listen, athletes have had coaches forever, right? Nobody ever thinks, oh, the poor athlete has a coach, can't do it on his own. Okay. But part of the coach's job is to get the guy in the game, right? Or get the
Mm-hmm.
person in the game, the woman, whatever, get their head in the game. You're coaching the person, not the problem, meaning not necessarily the sport thing, but just like, let me build you up, let me give you confidence, and let me help give you confidence, let me challenge you on what you're doing where you could be doing it better, but not in a demotivating way. More about, hey, what else could you be doing here that you feel would be beneficial in this situation,
That's cool.
right?
You mentioned
So
the three tasks that a leader needs to have. It's how to direct, when to direct, and then coaching. I don't think we talked too much about like how to direct. So is there any special way to actually be approaching direction when you're giving them, instead of just barking orders?
sure, check for understanding. That's the biggest thing, right? If you direct something, get feedback. Ask them what they learned, or what could you show me, if right, where you can actually see. Um, Direction is, be clear and don't assume. Check for understanding. Um, Most people are visual, so that's a clue there that can help with direction rather than just auditory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, direction comes from being direct, right? So not just telling and showing is probably the best way to direct.
And I suppose you want to also ask some open-ended questions versus close-ended for checking for understanding, because
Yeah.
I've been in a situation where I say, "Hey, am I clear?" And they say yes, and then it turns out they were not. So I guess you want to like, do you just go and ask them, say, "Hey, repeat back to me what you heard"? That sounds a little hokey, but do you just
Don't ever
like,
do that.
yeah,
That's demeaning. How would you feel that?
I get that a
Right?
lot.
Yeah.
Let me repeat back to you what I heard, and then it's like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. So you can offer it as the report. Let me repeat back what I heard, make sure that I got it right. Okay, but you see how that phrase, they're focusing on them, not on how well they directed you from the report standpoint. Well, it's the same thing from the leader standpoint. Hey, I want to check in with you. Maybe I didn't explain it as well as I could have. All right, could you tell me what you got out of what I just explained? Want to make sure we're on the same page, and I may have missed something. That's not demeaning because you're talking about yourself. But saying, hey, I want to make sure you understood what I just told you. Well, most people look at you and go, what am I, an idiot?
Hmm.
You know? So you don't want to demean them. So I just wanted to also weigh in here. There's a very well known coaching model called the GROW model. Okay. And GROW stands for goal, reality, options, and will. Okay. So you guys can look it up. But you always start with the goal, which is what do you want to achieve by the end of the meeting, for instance, right? Remember, I told you you got to form that gap, right? And then reality, what's happening now? What resources um, do we have that we can use here? All right. So you kind of want to think about what's the reality of the situation. Then the options are, what ideas can we come up with to achieve this goal? It can be a collaborative conversation. All right. And so you're going from the goal to the reality to the option. And then the last is the will. Okay. What can we commit to and what will we do and by when? So that's setting up the actions to be taken. So in any kind of coaching program, it should end with okay, where are you going from here? What are the actions you're going to take? When are you going to take them? And then also, how do you want to be held accountable to make sure that it happens? And that's what a lot of people lead off. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another model out there called Connect, Focus, Activate, and Review, which is when you go when you're connecting with people. Okay, first of all, make sure they're ready for the conversation. Second is the focus, which is the goal and the topic to be discussed. Here's what I want to talk about. Here's what the goal is of the meeting, or what do you have? What do you think? Make sure you're aligned. Okay. Then the activate stage is really about activating the conversation of using those four skills: listen and learn, inquire for insight, tell your truth, and express confidence in order to move towards action and come up with action. And then the last part is the review, where you're checking for understanding from what the report got out of the conversation, coming up with those, confirming the specific actions and timelines, and then setting up the accountability. So both the Connect, Focus, Activate, and Review and the Grow model all kind of work the same way.
Interesting. These models seem really helpful. Would you suggest someone that's kind of new to coaching or just using these frameworks or models to actually kind of present them to the person that they're working with to go through it? Or do you think it's something that you should just kind of like guide the conversation through?
Um, I think it depends on where your comfort level is as a leader. I don't have to. I think when I started coaching you, Henry, I used the Connect, Focus, Activate, and Review. Excuse
I
me.
think it
And
worked. It
then,
worked great.
and you had no idea I was coaching you. I was using a model. You had no idea. Later on, when I introduced you the model because you want to learn about coaching, I remember you were like, "Oh, I didn't realize that what you were doing." So it is a process. But
Gotcha.
again, fly by coaching, you're going to decide what part of the process do I have to use here.
That's true. Yeah, you're not going to say, "Give me a minute. Let me go look at the framework." Right? You're just going to have
Exactly.
to. That's cool. That's great. All right. Well, we're just about out of time, so we could probably wrap up. If you want to, Jonathan, you want to share what you got out of today's conversation?
Yeah. Well, for me, what I got out is hopefully that I address both from the leader's point of view coming into this on when to coach or when to direct, and hopefully from the report when to ask for what you need. That's what we were after. Just as a recap, I talked about some of the processes, what people go through from directing towards, I'm feeling unsure, and then the leader starting to do the coaching. Um, and again, what's in it for the leader? The leader is going to empower more autonomy and build self reliance in the people that they're leading, getting more time back to do other things. And then what's in it for the report is getting the autonomy, being left alone. becoming a thinker, not just a doer. So I think there's a lot of benefits on both sides, and hopefully that was explained well to the audience, and they walked away with that.
Yeah, that's great. I think I got out of this. I've been through this a bunch. We've talked about this a lot together, and I think the thing I'm reminded of the most is to check for understanding. I think that's very important. I struggle myself with communication at times, and so I don't always check for understanding in the right way. And I think I could do better there. So got some tips out of that. And then also the part to remind myself to make sure that I am meeting the person where they're at and being clear about that. It's we're in the kind of world where you want to give people opportunity, you want them to do well, and sometimes you pick the wrong person to just like I can be a more hands off leader, and so I think being able to understand when someone actually needs the support versus doesn't, because if you just are hands off with everyone, you're going to have issues with people. So I think reminding me to make sure that I meet them where they're at and understand where they're at. So this is great. This is awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, if you've made it this far, thank you very much. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and the bell button to get new episodes every Friday morning. And again, you've been listening to the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Aronson.
Thank you and have a great weekend.